Season 2, Episode 2, Choosing What Tools Work for You.
Welcome to How to Survive Until You're Published.
Because if you're drowning in words, so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.
Okay, so for this episode, we're going to be branching off a little more into what we learned while on our writing break from episode 1. Specifically that we wanted to talk about choosing writing tools that work for you. Because just because it works for someone else doesn't mean it's going to be great for you.
Yeah. So I know this was a huge thing for you, Megan. So what was it about, finding the right tools that helped you during your break?
So I think, well, first of all, I didn't really realize I was using the wrong tools for myself, so to speak. But I was talking to my husband about just being unmotivated to write, just super stuck in my story, feeling burnout, writer's block, all those horrible things. And he recommended a YouTube video to me. But kind of before I get into the YouTube video he recommended, it's something that I'd heard authors say before. Specifically on our podcast, we had J. Scott Savage mention this in his appearance, that the best writing advice you can get is that you shouldn't listen to writing advice. Seems really counterproductive for a writing podcast to say this, but it's true.
Yeah, so just turn it off right now. Just go home.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It's not important. But I think what's really meant for this is that not all writing advice might be right for you, or maybe not at that time, right?
Yeah.
It's all time dependent, personality dependent. There's a lot of different factors that play into it.
Yep.
Because writing is so unique, and people are unique, and why they write is unique. So what can work for you is. But kind of getting back into it, my husband recommended a YouTube video by a local script man, one of his favorite YouTubers to watch, especially in concerns to writing. He focuses heavily on advice for writing screenplays, but it still applies. But basically, this YouTube video he sent me was a very lengthy video where he went through evaluating different books and tools for writing fiction, the pros and cons and how he saw it. He did open the video kind of with that same statement that, hey, best writing advice might be not to listen to writing advice sometimes, or it's going to hit differently. One year, this might be the best tool for you. Another year, some other book might be the best, or some other piece of advice might be the best. But it was when he got to reviewing Save the Cat, writes a novel on the hero's journey, that it kind of hit me that, maybe I wasn't using the right tools for myself in the story I wanted to write. And I think my husband probably knew this from me discussing how I was frustrated with the plot points in my story and the story I wanted to write, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I love that. So, what was it specifically about Save the Cat?
It was...
go into that a little bit.
The beats. But I talked about this last episode as well. I realized I was trying to shove an adult story into a YA format on the hero's journey. So hero's journey definitely overlaps a lot with the plot points and Save the Cat beats. But I was having such a hard time with this debate moment in my story and break into 2 in the B story to really come through because I was trying to fit in. And I'm not saying that adult stories don't have these, but I guess I was trying to do a break into 2 and the debate from a more hero's journey standpoint, if that makes sense. So it's this character is coming into their own of age thing. Yeah. But I feel the characters I was trying to writing were very established in who they are. And the lesson that they were trying to learn might not be them becoming themselves or becoming the adult, It's more learning to trust others or learning that acceptance of their circumstances might be better or something like that, So it was just really those beats and also trying to stick too heavily to the beats.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the YouTuber's exact thing, but he was talking about how it's interesting because sometimes we see these books inspire the standard in the genre because they kind of are self-fulfilling prophecies of what you expect in a story. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just the beats. I was trying too hard to
To fit them in. Yeah.
To fit them in and to make sure I had every single beat at the precise place they needed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, it's a tool, and like going into that word, it being a tool, it's supposed to be there to help you. And if it isn't, if you feel like it's just not working, that's totally okay. You go see what else you can find. Go listen to other advice and ignore it, but listen and try to find the advice that does work.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, it's a tool. It doesn't necessarily have to be exact. And I think maybe this is where I needed to learn to be a pantser a bit more.
Yay!
Rather than it being so formulaic in my writing, because it wasn't allowing the writing to breathe and the story to breathe how it needed to be. So I'm not saying I'm not going to use Save the Cat, because I still do really love those beats. And I'm not saying that the adult stories won't have these beats, because they absolutely will.
It's just different.
And you don't necessarily have to shove it into the perfect mold for it to work.
Yeah, I totally can get that, because sometimes there's comfort in the formula and like knowing what to expect, knowing what's going to happen. But with writing, it's so organic, because when you're writing a novel about a protagonist, about a person, they're a person.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to ride with who they are and what they're experiencing and how they're going to react to those experiences. And sometimes those happen differently than how everybody, says it should happen. And it's kind of like you have to figure out how that works organically for them until you put those tools to use.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that does. So kind of like into another question then. Just the overall question is, how do you choose the tools to use in writing that work for you?
So I feel like you have to discover your story first.
Yeah, you kind of talked about this with it organically happening with your characters.
Yeah, like I feel like, a story, consider your theme, what you want to teach, like what you want, how you want things to come together. You have to kind of discover how that big picture is going to work for you. And specifically for me, I had to really break down my characters and like break down what I knew about them and how I wanted their journeys to go before I even thought about what tools to use. And so, but the big thing is like, some tools are going to work for some stories. Some are going to work for other stories. Some are going to work when you're working on it when you're 25 years old. Some will work better when you're, in your 40s. It's different and it changes. And I would love to tell you that there's one size fits all, but there's really not. You just have to test and choose and pick and try different things and test it all out and get frustrated and...
Yeah, it is a lot of trial and error. And I think probably exposing yourself just to a vast amount of tools can help with that, because you never know what's going to resonate. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's lots of ways. Going along with that, just during this, my 3-month break, I started having these kind of thoughts about how I wanted to like start into editing and start fixing and restructuring my novel so that it was organic what I wanted it to be. And I thought back to when I very first started getting back into writing back in 2020. I was looking at all these different plotting tools because I love plotting tools and softwares, and I thought it was fun. And one of the things I ran across was how J.K. Rowling plotted her novel. And, somebody had made some software for it. And, I love J.K. Rowling. I'm sure everybody in the world does, but she's always been my role model. And so I looked, and it's just a standard spreadsheet with her different plot lines, and a timeline on the left.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, just super simple, just straightforward. And she was able to do it straightforward like that after she had discovered her story. Because it's kind of one of those things where you have to kind of figure out how everything's going to work, and then you can put it down. And for me, it's been a little bit of both. I've been able to discover as I've been working on my spreadsheet. But
in a twisted turn of events, Amy's become a plotter.
Whoa! Crazy, never thought that was gonna happen. Yeah, no, I did learn a lot through the pantsing process, but there comes a point where you accept your fate and understand, at least for me, that you're a plotter. So yeah, I just think it's just keep trying out different things and see what works, and keep trying and don't give up on it.
So kind of like we've been talking about, you have to take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to writing advice, because it is personal and it is a discovery journey, especially when it comes to the tools that work for you. But we can kind of talk about how we figure out what tools work for us.
Yeah, so for me, it kind of came down to after I took my break and I was able to look at everything in a new way, I just wrote down what I knew. Like, for sure. I started with my characters because those journeys are the most important to me and how I like to write my novels. And so I started with what I knew. And specifically what I did was at the beginning of the book, where are they at? In the middle of the book, where are they at? At the end of the book, where are they at? And then, like, if I could envision where they were at between those two, then I wrote the list down. And I just kind of said, this is where I want them to be. This is where I feel like they're at. This is what I know. And then from there, I built.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I should probably do this a little bit better with my characters and where they're at in their journeys. But sometimes it's just like key elements or plot points in the story and things that you know are going to affect your characters. I write down exactly what I know.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but a lot of times, like, I get to write something really small. It's either a scene or a character. Yeah. So writing down those key scenes, then figuring out how they fit into different tools and what tools might help you actually write that story you want to write.
Yeah, and what was cool that I did was I would write down, kind of going along with that, I would write down what I knew, and then if I wanted to build on that, to kind of discover a little bit more, I would pants the scene.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I would just and this is what I did. I used Scrivener. I would put what I knew in regular and then space down, italics, and I'd pants the scene. And I'd write down how I felt things were going to go, what she was going to say, what she was feeling, so I could get inside of her head. And from there, I was able to be like, oh, okay, this is where she's going to be at this point. And this is what I want to have happen here. It was super cool.
Yeah, I think too, that kind of speaks to maybe writing things out of order. Like, if there's something that you're super excited to write about, maybe kind of pants that and then discover around that. Or plot around it and figure out which, plot structure you want to use. What character arc or trope might really, pull those elements that are fun for you to write out.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Yeah, because, it's, I don't know, writing is exciting and fun. And when you're writing by, pure inspiration, by, what you're excited to write about, that's where things really, that's where you figure out where your themes are and, why you're doing it and what you're doing. And so taking advantage of those, if you can picture the scene and picture the emotions and, feel it, write it and see what happens, see what comes of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really just a lot of trial and error with different tools. I guess another thing I could add is you can look up other people's advice on how they've used different tools.
Yeah, I feel like writers get really excited when they figure it out. So they're really excited to share. So yeah, this is just an example of something that you could try. It's something that worked for me. But if it doesn't work, that's okay, because you're different. Your process is different, and you just have to kind of discover what that is.
Yeah. So our challenge for you is to write down what you know about your story and then take 3 new techniques of any category and see if it works for you. So maybe try out a new plot structure, try out a new way of mapping your characters, dialogue, or the scene and sequel, different ways of pacing, or whatever it is, and just try the new technique and see if it works.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, because if you're drowning in words, then so are we, and you might as well not do it alone.